That is the question that the psalmist is asking. Where is God? Why does God seem to be far away? Why does God seem to be standing far off? And many a times as Christians, there are also times that we ask ourselves, where is God and what is he doing? I want to tell you a story. Recently, I watched the movie Unbroken. I don't know how many of you have watched this movie. Unbroken is the story of Louis Zamperini. Louis Zamperini died last year. I think he was around 97 to or close 100 years. He was a prisoner of war. But before he became a prisoner of the war, he was training for the Olympics. And during that time, the Second World War happened. And when the Second World War happened, he was taken as a soldier. And at one point, their plane is shot, and they end up with two other men on a raft on the sea. And for a long time, I think around 47 days, they're just floating on the sea. And Louis prays and asks God, if you save me, then I will be able to serve you. But what does God do? God actually brings their raft to the shores of Japan. And as you know, during the war, all countries were fighting each other, and so they are taken prisoners in Japan. And so instead of things actually becoming better, they become worse, because they are taken prisoners where they are beaten and tortured physically, continuously. And the soldiers in Japan were watching the American soldiers, waiting for them to give up and just die. During the movie, you see the scene where Louis is just being beaten. And I'm sure he was asking God, where are you? I prayed that you would save me. I prayed that God, you would stop, I would stop being tormented. That whole escapade affects his life permanently. When he goes back to he comes back to the US, he comes back as a broken and totally abused man. He's physically and psychologically tortured. And before he actually is able to move on, he goes into alcoholism and also almost divorces his wife. And I'm sure during that time that Louis was going through all these problems, he was asking God, where are you? Why do you seem to stand far away? Why do you seem not to save me from the torment of my oppressors? You can imagine it took about 2 years for them to actually be in that war as prisoners aboard that raft, and eventually for him to be saved and to be able to come back home. The psalmist in this passage is talking about God's absence. And he begins by questioning why God is not present, why God is not doing anything. When we look around us, when we look at the evil that is happening around us, it's easy to think that God has forgotten. It's easy to think that God is not helping his people. The psalmist says in verse 2, the wicked person is hunting down the weak. He's caught up in devising schemes to harm the poor, the weak people. And he's boasting about all the wicked things that he's doing. And that is what we see in our world today. If you look at our world today, it's very easy to see the prosperity of the wicked. The prosperity of the person who is not worshiping the Lord. You don't have to go far to see people even shunning God's name. People even cursing. People even doing all sorts of things against God's name. And that is what the psalmist is talking about. And he notes in verse 5 that God, in the wicked person's mind, there is no God. there is no room for God. The wicked person is boasting. God cannot hear. God cannot see. There is no room in his mind for God. And the wicked person is also boasting about his own power. He's boasting that nothing will shake me. Nothing. I will always be happy. I will never have any trouble. And the wicked person is sitting to plot against the good people and against the righteous people. But has God left his world? Has God taken off? Has God abandoned his created world? That is what the psalmist seems to be asking. He is looking at all the wickedness, all that the wicked people are doing, and asking, where is God? But the most interesting thing is, if you look at verse 10 and 11, he says that his victims are crushed, they collapse, they fall under his strength. And he says to himself, God has forgotten. He covers his face and he never sees.